So, is today an ending or a beginning? Today is August 1st, the beginning of a new month, which means it's the ending of July. For many of our children, school is about to begin, which means it's the end of their summer vacation. So we experience beginnings and endings so often in our lives that most of the time we don't even notice them when they're taking place. For the most part, we just breeze through our lives moment to moment without taking a pause, for that breath in between. And one of the books that we invite our chaplain interns to read is a book called Transitions: Making Sense of Our Life Changes by William Bridges. And this book was originally published almost 50 years ago, but there is still wisdom in some of the timeless themes that he addresses. Bridges' main premise is that as a culture, we haven't been taught how to move through the transitions in our lives, and that we don't understand the difference between a transition and a change. He writes, when he's talking about transition and changes, he writes, our society confuses them constantly, leading us to imagine that transition is just another word for change. But it isn't. He says, change is your move to a new city, your shift to a new job. It is the birth of a new baby or the death of your father. It is the switch from the old health plan at work to the new one, or the replacement of your manager by a new one, or it is the acquisition that your company just made. In other words, change is situational. Transition, on the other hand, is psychological. It is not those events, but rather the inner orientation and the self redefinition that we have to go through in order to incorporate any of those changes into our lives. He says, and this is an important sentence, he says, without a transition, a change is just a rearrangement of the furniture. Unless transition happens, the change won't work because it won't take. Whatever word we use, our society talks a lot about change, but it seldom deals with transition. And unfortunately for us, it is the transition that blindsides us and is often the source of our troubles. He finishes with, it is thus no accident that people imagine that they can prepare for, say, retirement by making adequate financial preparations, choosing a good place to live, and developing some new interests. In those articles about retirement, you don't find anything about going through that 3-phase transition process that this book deals with, or how little getting all set for the changes prepares you for the transition. So in his book, Bridges goes on to explain that transition has 3 phases to it. A true healthy transition has an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And so many times we go straight and we rush right into the new beginning without even acknowledging that something has ended. Or We get so thrown off course and feel so lost when we enter into that neutral zone that we go into a depression or a midlife crisis because we don't know how to sit with or be with that transitional void, so to speak. So, Bridges' invitation is to begin to explore the concept that T.S. Eliot so eloquently wrote about, that the end is where we start from. The end is the beginning. And so I want us to take a little bit of time to explore this concept today. As we prepare, as we process the news that Chelsea just shared with us, it is an opportunity to think about and talk about the transitions going on in our own lives, in the world at large, and in our little UUCGV faith community. The only constant thing in life is change. But how we choose to embrace and enter into that change really is everything. And I think that the first step in this process of transition is to name where we are and acknowledge these transition points in our lives. It really can be that simple, but they need to be named and acknowledged because that's the key. Because life is full of endings, but where we run into a problem is when we just go straight from the ending that we didn't acknowledge right into the beginning. There is a value in taking a breath and naming, acknowledging, and embracing the ending. That is why we have graduation ceremonies. That's why we have funeral and memorial services, because we come together to acknowledge that something has ended, that something has changed, and a new transition into a new way of being is beginning. Sometimes the endings are drastic, like we experience with the death of a loved one or a divorce or leaving a job. But many times the endings are more subtle. And this is where we get tripped up. There is an ending with the birth of a child. There is an ending that takes place during the ritual of a wedding. There is an ending that happens when we bring a new puppy or kitten or animal into our home. Yes, everything I just named are beginnings, and we tend to view them as such, but they are endings also. With the birth of a new baby comes the loss of just running to the store to buy some groceries. With the beginning of the new marriage comes the loss of just doing it my way whenever I feel like it. With the joy of bringing home a new puppy or kitten comes the ending of the routine of being able to just spontaneously go away for a weekend with no thought about who's going to stay at the house or take care of anything. And so we've all done it, we all do it. And we've had so many endings and beginnings in our lives, it just becomes a normal part of living. But the key is just to intentionally stop, acknowledge that three-part process, and then move forward. It doesn't work to just jump from one moment into the next moment, into the next moment. It doesn't have to be big. It can be as much to just stop, take a deep breath, say to yourself or to somebody else, I see this moment. This is big. Congratulations. Wow. Good job. It's not hard and it's not time consuming, but it is very important. We can't just breeze through our lives moment to moment without taking that pause, without taking the breath in between, whether it is motherhood and parenting, or making the decision to retire, or planning a wedding, or graduating. It's just saying, this is ending, something else is about to begin, and in the meantime, I'm in this neutral phase, the pause, the in between. Sometimes we are unconsciously grieving the endings that we haven't actually acknowledged. And we can't really start something until we at least acknowledge that something before it has ended. And so I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about our congregation, about where we've been in the last year and a half. I was telling the leadership team on Thursday that when everything just shut down, it felt like we collectively had all been thrown off of our houseboats into this river, and we were all just trying to keep everybody from drowning. But now we've kind of figured it out. We've kind of figured out Zoom. We're working on this hybrid. I think we did a good job in the last year and a half of keeping us all connected. But now we're not all floundering anymore. We've had a year and a half of that kind of neutral, oh my gosh, now what? That most of us are back on our life rafts. We don't have it totally figured out, but the key now as we enter into this next year is not how do we keep people from drowning, but how do we just keep people from floating away, right? How do we continue to keep the connections? How do we enter into the new beginning of the new reality of what Unitarian Universalism is in the year 2021 post COVID? And I don't mean that COVID is over. I mean, I believe that COVID is one of those times in human history that in so many ways we're probably never going back to the year 2019 for our kids, for the way that we interact, for our congregation. So what do we do with that? And so as I mentioned, my friend Jennifer, who's a chaplain at Hope West, said as she, had been in the hospital with COVID and her reality is now different. It's not a new normal, it's a new reality. And so what do we do with this new reality? What do we do kind of in that in-between phase where, we kind of feel like we're getting life back to normal, but if you look at the numbers, the COVID numbers are spiking again. The kids are going back to school, but they're not going to be wearing masks. So it'll be normal, but it won't be normal. And what do we do with all of this? How do we acknowledge what things have ended, where we are in the transition, and what we're looking forward to? So this change, this is the kind of psychological part of the transition that I want to talk about. When everything stopped, we had that psychological, oh no, what do I do? And then we went into a little bit of a, this Zoom thing is kind of nice. And the psychological transition of, for some people, that, I really kind of like not being chaotic on Sunday mornings and trying to get the kids to the church. And I kind of really enjoy listening to a sermon while I'm at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. And there was also some loss with that too. And I miss my friends, right? And so it's a little bit of all of the in-between. And I think that's kind of where we are now. And so when people ask me, well, Wendy, when are we going back to full services? I have to say, I don't know. Wendy, are we going to have the RE children's program downstairs this fall? I don't know. Are we going to have the in-gathering ceremony in September? I don't know, because we're in that in-between phase right now. Because some things have definitely ended and some things are about to begin, but right now, we just don't know about anything. And it's not just for our little community, it's for the world at large. This is just a time in human history that we don't know. So the key that we get to practice is being okay in that neutral zone, because that's where we are. We're in the neutral zone. There's been an ending. There will be a beginning. And right now, we're where we are. And it can be really exciting. It can be really, really beautiful. It can be really, really fun. And there can be grief with it. There can be fear with it. There can be all the different ranges of emotions with it, because it's unfamiliar. And we don't know what the future is going to look like. And so what I want to do today is just have a conversation with us about what that might look like as our UUCGV community. One of the very consistent feedback, that's not correct grammar, but that's okay. The consistent feedback that I got this year was that people really appreciated the live interaction on Zoom, the ability, at least on Sunday mornings, to open up the conversation and talk to each other on the Zoom screen and talk about what the sermon was about. And so that's what I hope that we'll continue doing. And that's what I want to do today, is for us to have a conversation with each other so that we can be reminded that our connections are strong. Even though we have some people here in person, even though we have some people on the Zoom screen, we're still a community, we're still connected. And that's what I wanna have us talk a little bit about this. So I will start. So the questions that I'm going to throw out to us are, what are some of the endings that you've experienced and that you want to acknowledge in your life or in this community this year? Where are you right now? Not where you should be or where you want to be, but where are you? Because we just have to acknowledge where we are. And then what are some of the hopes that you have for what our new beginnings can look like? So I'll start. And I can't ever usually get through a sermon, for those of you who are visiting, without crying. So that's who I am. But so I'll start, and I'll just acknowledge that I miss the people we lost this year. I miss Dwayne and Arlita. I miss Wes and Phil. I miss Jack. I miss Susanna. I miss Marcia. I miss all the people we lost. And when we do come back, we're not going to have Arlita to tell us to wear our name tags, and she would have been telling you all to wear your mask, I can guarantee you that. And we're not going to have Dwayne to give us a hug, and we don't have Phil's beautiful poetry, and we don't have Jack and his smile, and Susanna and Marcia. So those are endings. I miss standing up here and looking out and seeing a completely filled sanctuary with 70 or 80 people here. I miss that. I miss the freedom of being able to just say to the leadership team, let's all get together and let's meet at the church and let's have this wonderful gathering and plan what we want to do for the year. I miss being able to do that without wondering, do we need to be inside or outside? Do we need to wear masks or not? That's an ending, and we're probably going to continue to have those conversations again and again and again. And so in the in-between time, I don't know what this fall is going to look like. I don't know what this hybrid service is going to look like. It looks pretty good today, but we've had lots of trial and error throughout the summer. It's all new and we're experimenting as we go. I don't know what our religious education program is going to look like. What do the families of our children need? Maybe their needs are totally different in the fall of 2021 than what we would have said and prepared in the fall of 2019. Things have changed. But then, like I said, it's a 3-step process. There's also the beginnings. And so I'm also excited. I'm excited for this coming year. I'm excited that I'm learning how to do iMovie and I get better at it every day. And I'm excited that we have Jimmy back there who actually understands how all this technology works and can actually show us how to do some of it so that you can actually hear some of the songs eventually when we're in the sanctuary. And I'm excited to think about all of the different ways that we can and we will continue the connection with all of this community, everybody, both virtually and in person. And maybe it looks like pivoting a little bit. Maybe when we put together the adult religious education classes, we do all of that virtually so that everybody can be part of that. And maybe instead of having huge gatherings and getting back to 100 people on a Sunday morning, maybe we start planning more smaller gatherings like the chalice circles and, the circle suppers where maybe you have, about 6 to 8 people coming together, but coming together more often and in different ways with different opportunities so that the connections remain. They're just a little bit different. So that is kind of how I'm thinking of transitions, the endings and the in-between time and the beginnings. And so what I do want to do is I want to invite us into a conversation about that together. We have a few minutes. So the way that this works is I will allow everybody to unmute themselves. And the tradition here is that if you are on Zoom and you would like to say something, just go ahead and unmute your speaker and I will be able to see that and I'll invite you to say something. And if you're here in the congregation today and you'd like to say something, I invite you just to come up and you can look right into this camera right here so that everybody can see you too. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna figure out how to do that. So you now have the ability to unmute yourself. So would somebody like to start? Floyd, go ahead.
Okay, we, for half of the congregation, the male half, men's cooking has